What is up? Good morning and welcome to Mock It Like It's Hot. The NFL draft is just about halfway over. In fact, we are about an hour away from the third and final day finally kicking off. But I'm not even going to do an NFL draft today. How in the world would you like to spend this last hour than doing a Dynasty Startup Mock? However, we do have Kevin Coleman from Footballguys with us, so you can bet there's going to be plenty of rookie talk. The draft room is full. Let's get started. Good morning and welcome to Mock It Like It's Hot, Club Fantasy's weekly mock draft show. I am your host, Ryan Weisse. With me, as always, except last week, so not technically always, but when family's in town, we make exceptions. Austin Amandolia. Austin, how are you doing this morning,
buddy? I'm still recovering from the 8th overall pick. I still can't wrap my head around what happened at that point, and I haven't really been able to focus since then. So, we're hanging in there.
Yeah, for those who don't know or who haven't followed the show much, Austin is a Falcons fan, and the Michael Penix Jr. pick has the entire Atlanta world just shook at this point. And then from someone who is shook by a first-round pick to someone who – did you guys even have a first-round pick, Kevin? I can't remember it.
Yeah.
The Dallas Cowboys fan, Kevin Coleman, my good friend from Footballguys. How are you this morning?
I'm doing much better than Austin is in terms of my draft picks and my team, but I'm doing good. Little disappointed at my boy Troy Franklin. I've been a big fan of his for a while. He fell out of day two, but not a death sentence. I don't think. I think people are underestimating kind of landing spot and stuff. But doing good. I have about a 30-hour football guide work weekend ahead of me, so I'm not looking forward to that though.
Yeah. If you thought what these guys do before the draft is impressive, wait till you see the quick turnaround, what they do with all the landing spots and everything. So shout out to Kevin, shout out to the Devy Royale, another one of your projects over there. So you got a lot going on, and we appreciate all the hard work you put in. And Austin, the group's with you, T's and P's. They feel bad for what's going on in Atlanta right now. Guys, let's get the draft board up. Let's talk about this draft a little bit. So as I mentioned, I am not doing a rookie draft. Everyone else is doing a rookie draft. I decided let's do a startup. It made a lot of sense when I was scheduling this thing. Let's do a startup in the middle of the draft because we don't know everything yet. Probably should have done a rookie draft, but who cares? There's going to be plenty of rookie talk. And then unbeknownst to Kevin, and even unbeknownst to myself, because I didn't know Kevin was going to be the guest, when I chose this schedule, I decided to do what I call the Austin draft. Austin has been a proponent, or had previously been a proponent of, because of the uneven landscape of tight ends, one of the way to fix fantasy football is to not require a tight end. Well, if you've ever followed along in the chat, you know that Kevin and I have never agreed on a single tight end take in the history of fantasy football. But I think we both agree tight ends should be in the league. We're going to talk a little bit about more about that in a second. I'm going to go ahead and start this draft. It looks like Adam is in the draft room. He is going to make that first pick. Kevin has the second pick. In fact, let's talk about our drafters a little bit. Adam W. picking from the first spot. Kevin picking from the second. Father Dynasty at 3. Odwar at 4. The Great War, I don't know the rest of your name, at 5. Astro Dabber at 6. Brocal at 7. Grindberg at 8. Diamond Mike at 9. And Austin bringing up the tail end. I did choose third round reversal for this draft because, honestly, I think that's how you should be doing some of your startup drafts, kind of even out, especially in a super flex, what's happening from the first pick all the way to the 21st pick in this specific draft, because it is a 10-team draft. But as I mentioned, it's super flex. And guys, I think we should spend a little bit of time talking about these rookies, specifically these rookie quarterbacks, because when you look at this draft, it kind of went the way we expected it to go. I don't think, honestly, one quarterback other than Michael Penix ended up somewhere where we didn't expect him to go. 6 quarterbacks go in the first round there, Kevin. I guess my first question is, based on the landing spots, which again kind of went according to Hoyle, based on the landing spots, did this change any of your rankings for any of these 6 guys?
No. Well, I mean, it's hard not to. The elephant in the room is Michael Penix Jr. at 8. I think it changed it a little bit in terms of, I think from the back end of the first, it changes some stuff. So if guys are going to, I still think that Bo Nix to me is a better rookie. Like, if you're going to take a shot in the back end of the first round over like Michael Penix Jr., I think you do Bo Nix because he's going to be out there. He's going to be starting more than likely this year. You're going to have that production from your quarterback spot. And I do think that it changes what that back end looks like, which is good for probably the early second area because you're going to see a lot of value kind of drop and dip there. Some of these running backs are there. They're a lot of fun in terms of that. But as the overall, I think JJ McCarthy's interesting because I think that, you know, I've seen him. We started a rookie draft this morning. He went 103. He went QB2.
Wow.
And I think they love the landing spot. And I think that is the quarterback that's going to have a lot of variance. You're going to see him 103 to 109. I've seen, you know, both spots in terms of that. You love his spot. You know, I was a very pre-NFL. I hate everything that the New England's going to do, and I don't want to take the quarterback New England. But then you look at Drake May, who I think I am a little higher on than most, than like Jaden Daniels. But then, you know, Washington's done a pretty good job of building around him. I'm going to be interested to see what they do kind of in this today. I don't think it changes much, but I do think JJ is going to go a little higher than people think.
Based on our history, Kevin, I don't know why I'm surprised that you're higher on Drake May than most. It was usually just Austin telling me I was wrong about Drake May. And let me be clear, I don't hate Drake May. I just have Daniels and McCarthy ahead of him, though. It'll be interesting to see how everything shakes out with McCarthy with those wide receivers right now, Austin. It's still really hard for me to put May ahead of McCarthy, but I know you're a big May guy.
Yeah, I think it really depends on your format. So in Dynasty, I mean, I definitely still have May ahead of McCarthy, but I think there's a good chance they both sit for a decent amount of the season, particularly May. The Patriots writer for The Athletic was mentioning like he might not start until like November, right? Because if they don't fix their left tackle situation in New England, there's no reason to put him in danger and to build up that scar tissue out the gate. Put Jacoby Brissett out there, let him get the offense rolling. So I definitely I'm not necessarily prioritizing him in those redraft leagues, but I still have May over McCarthy just because of the level of talent there.
Yeah, I know we're focusing on Dynasty, Kevin, but other than Caleb Williams, are any of these rookies on your redraft radar? I mean, Jaden Daniels is interesting because of the rushing upside, but I guess, is he going to start right away? I mean, they have Marcus Mariota, so you assume he's going to.
Yeah, I mean, Jaden would be the guy that I'd say I don't mind taking a shot at him. Like, it's kind of similar to what Stroud was last year, right? Like, kind of like, okay, your QB2, if you take a QB2 in like rounds, gosh, I think I got him like 15 or 16 round, a couple of redraft leagues.
Okay.
Him or Bryce, who you taking? And so it's kind of like, well, there's not really another Bryce guy because Caleb's going to go a little higher. So I don't mind taking a shot with Jaden Daniels because I do think that they're building around him. Kingsbury's offense, as much as like, I despise Cliff Kingsbury, I do think from a fantasy perspective and what they've been able to build around him, he could score fantasy points this year. I think defensively they got a little bit better, so maybe you're not going to see as many negative game scripts either. So maybe the efficiency will be up there. But I think Jaden would be the one guy I'd be interested in. And I keep going back to JJ. Like if you can get JJ late or just maybe that ad later, like, yeah, he might not start right away. But I do think that they like him. And if you can get him with those pieces, if they add a wide receiver 3 today, maybe they go get Troy Franklin today. Like, I think it gets interesting with that talk.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense just because it's hard to ignore. Again, you're going to hear this from me a million times from now until the start of the season. It's hard to ignore the weapons in Minnesota. Like, it's impossible to ignore the weapons. I don't think we can get out of here, Austin, without talking more about what the Falcons did. So you were the one who pointed out during our draft show that like there looked like there was open hostility between the GM and the owner during this pick, that Kirk Cousins wasn't even made aware of this pick. And then there was the quote that if it takes 4 years for this guy to start, you still got to do it for an older prospect. So as a Falcons fan, just what is your general take? Keeping in mind that Kirk Cousins is still coming off of this Achilles tear.
Yeah, it's still just such a fascinating move from my vantage point. I'm like, I mean, first off, there was definitely reporting that Kirk Cousins was aware that the Falcons would probably go ahead and draft a successor in this draft. He had no idea, though, that it was going to be with the 8th overall pick. Like, that's the huge thing here, right? Like, the amount of draft capital that they gave up for Michael Penix is really the eye-popping headline here. And honestly, there's part of me that's like, is there something we don't know here about Kirk Cousins? Is he not doing as well in his Achilles recovery as we thought? I doubt that's the case. And I don't understand what's going on with this team build. It seems like a really bad move to make when you just had the honeymoon period going with Kirk Cousins. And honestly, like, and if you don't win the Super Bowl in 2 years, this pick is a waste.
So I promise you, I don't know how the algorithm found me this morning, but I saw this post from this dude. Like someone was making fun of this guy who was in Hawaii with his fiance on Tinder talking about he wants to cheat on her before they got married. And that was when you're talking about the honeymoon phase with the Falcons and Kirk Cousins. Yeah, you waited until you were married to go ahead and bring Penix in. Kevin, what was your pre-draft take on Penix? Because he seemed like a love or hate prospect. And there were people who literally thought he was trash. I heard round 5 prospect yesterday when he was taken in round 1.
I was always of the notion I love him as a second round pick. Okay. I loved him have like a guy that could come in and be serviceable. If he stays healthy, he can sling it. Like he has the ability to kind of, he's just a fun fantasy quarterback. Now, as an NFL quarterback, will you ever win a division with him? I don't know, but he definitely can score fantasy points. So if like my take from a fantasy perspective, like I love getting a shot. Like I love the Raiders in the second round, so a team like that where you're like, hey, he can get out there and he can and he go through it. I think the biggest part, the thing I've been fighting with, like, and you've seen me in base camp fighting with like all the guys, they keep using like the Packers as an example.
Oh, the Packers. Everybody loves to make that connection.
The Packers didn't win a Super Bowl. They actually screwed Aaron Rodgers by not giving him any weapons. You remember that whole argument we had for 2 years about no weapons? They lost out on their area. And then Jordan Love's fine, but like I don't think Jordan Love can win a Super Bowl. Like I like him, but I don't think he can win a Super Bowl. So it's like that like argument makes me laugh so much because it didn't win. They didn't win. They didn't do what they needed to do in terms of if you're not winning the Super Bowl, it doesn't matter. And when you're looking at it from that perspective, like they just did a disservice to Kirk Cousins, Falcons fans, because the build, it's so weird. Like you needed an edge rusher, in my opinion, and you're sitting there at 8 and you could have really taken a guy to go after the quarterback. And so from just a fantasy perspective, it's just hard. It's hard to draft him in rookie drafts because what is he going to go late first? You're going to stash him for 2 years. And then you're kind of like, the Love thing worked out. But how many of those Jordan Love teams won a fantasy championship in 3-4 years that they waited? Exactly. I would argue not very many. So that's the part.
And Jack Sensen points out that Love and Penix are currently the same age. So there's that. Austin, I remember, actually, I just realized, Austin, you were not on the show last week. On our show last week, Penix went at the 10 in the rookie draft, and we laid into that pick. It was a 1 quarterback draft. And so we laid into that pick, but I remember saying, if Penix is a first-round pick, we're going to look like the assholes. I don't think we look like the assholes still, and he is a first-round pick. not an ideal landing spot. So that was interesting. Guys, I'm going to ask these guys a couple more questions before we get into the draft. If you have never tuned into this show before, just let me break a few things down for you. The draft kind of goes on in the background, and then I'm going to start asking them questions about the draft. We do not grade every single team. That is not what this show is about. This show is about looking for trends, looking for interesting picks, things that you can use when you have your real drafts in a few weeks or a few days if you're doing a startup draft. Basically just looking for ways to make you a better fantasy football player through mock drafting. Austin and Kevin will recap their drafts, and I will pick what I think is the worst pick of the draft, all in good fun, but I will give you a hard time about it. But if you're here for us to rate your team, it's not going to happen. I'm sorry. That's just not what we do on this show, plain and simple. But I wanted to get back into one more question. I want to talk a little bit more about the format. And Austin, this is a format that I've heard of it before, but you and I started doing this show 3 years ago, and really I've called it the Austin format. And I'm actually just going to let you go ahead and explain the format a little bit, Austin.
Yeah, so it's really, this format is meant to solve the kind of tight end conundrum that we often run into in fantasy football, where you either have an elite top 3 guy or you're searching the waiver wires every week trying to find some serviceable guy that's going to hopefully fall into the end zone. And so instead of having the tight end position, you turn it into a receiver flex so that you have the option to get those elite tight ends who function as receivers, or you can play just a different receiver in that spot. And I feel like this really helps balance out that tight end position.
Yeah, I'm actually going to do something I don't normally do. Let me bring this up here and show you guys the roster formatting. So this just puts Adam's team first, but it's 2 running backs, a quarterback. And then you'll see that there's a regular flex, wide receiver, running back flex, but then 4 wide receiver positions that are wide receiver, tight end positions. And most formats will let you do this. Sleeper makes it very easy, but this is also a super flex draft. So let me go ahead and minimize that. But that's how I went and laid this thing out. And Austin, kind of explain, or I guess not explain, my first question to you is, last year, we kind of saw the resurgence of tight ends, especially a lot of really good young tight ends. Has your opinion changed at all, or do you still think this is the better way to go to even out leagues?
Yeah, I still think this is the way to go. And before the show, I just did a quick poll of the finishing position of the fantasy tight ends last year. The number one tight end last year in fantasy football, as everyone knows, was Sam LaPorta in PPR formats. He would have been wide receiver 16 on the season if he were a wide receiver. So in this draft, he's actually going right around that range. He went as the 15th pass catcher off the board. Meanwhile, Kyle Pitts, who was tight end 12, still a starting tight end in 12-team formats, would have been wide receiver 51. So yes, I love not having to play the wide receiver 51 if I can help it.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. My producers reminded me that I should tell everybody who's watching us, if you're not already subscribed on YouTube, we would very, very much appreciate that subscription. I yell at you guys about this every week. It's free. It's a button you have to click. We're trying to get to 1,000 subscribers before the season starts. Click the damn button. Thank you, Jay. And then Astro, you put the laughing face here, so I don't know if you're making fun of us, but you can certainly reach out to any of us on Sleeper or Twitter or anywhere. It's what we do is give draft advice. And I'll tell you right now, when I need dynasty advice, Kevin can attest to this. Kevin is the first one who gets a DM from me when I need dynasty advice. So that is exactly what he's there for. Kevin, as I mentioned earlier in the show, you and I have fought about tight ends for eternity. Cough, cough, Cole Kmet. What is your honest take? And if you don't like it, you don't like it. What is your honest take on a format like this that kind of minimizes the strategy around drafting a tight end?
So, I mean, I don't love it, but I understand trying like something new. Like I understand trying like, hey, to do it. I don't mind it anyway. The biggest thing is, so I've done this league before. Like a few years ago, we started a league with no tight ends, and it folded after 2 years. And the reason why is because it didn't have a ton of flexibility, like roster construction and build, and then the tight end position was really useless, in my opinion, because like Austin just talked about, the scoring was so, well, yeah, I'm not going to have, why would I have Mark Andrews when he's wide receiver 50 or whatever the case may be. And so I think that I like having the tight end position. If you want to have tight end position, in my opinion, you really need to have like, tight end premium, but real premium, like 2.0, not like the 1.5, because I don't think that does enough. Like you need real premium 2.0 to really kind of dictate team builds, because it's all about how you build your teams. 100. And like, and Dynasty is all about trading. So when I'm looking at it from this perspective, when you have like an extra position and then you have that 2.0 premium, it allows for more trading and activity. The more trade and activity you have in your leagues, the healthier the league. That's how I kind of look at Dynasty, because you want to keep your league going. Because we see every year, don't we see all these people say, oh my gosh, my league folded after so-and-so, and they did all this stuff. And so we see that. So the healthier the league is, the more active the league. That's why I like having the tight end position. But I don't like just strictly tight end. Like give me 2.0 tight end premium. Give me a real premium there, because then you have some variance, especially with like, how a team's getting built. Are they going through quarterback, the super flex part of it? Or are they going zero running back and really going to go heavy tight end? Like, I think there's ways to kind of build teams like that. That's my preference. Now for this, if everybody in the league agrees they want to try it, go ahead. Like that's probably the area I do. I would probably start with redraft first, then go dynasty and see how it works and just kind of give it a shot, because the league that we did try it definitely did not last.
Oh, I think it's a really good point. And I've been one who has argued mildly against tight end premium. Kevin and I disagreeing again, but you hit the point on what I like. You said what I mean. 1.5 didn't do anything for me except make the better tight ends better and didn't change anything.
Yeah.
2.0 is perfect, because you bring up the point is it changes the way people draft. And that's what you kind of want to do. Otherwise it gets stale. It really, really does. Whereas 2.0 on tight ends, it's not the equivalent of going super flex, but my goodness, do you see tight ends start going insanely early. And one thing I wanted to point out that I forgot to mention earlier, when it comes to startup mock drafts, if you've never done a dynasty before, there are two things I need to make you very aware about this mock draft before we start talking about it. This draft is only 15 rounds because I only run this show for an hour. I'm not trying to take up everybody's day. A normal dynasty startup is well over 20 rounds. You are building a roster that you are going to keep or trade away for ages. So you are literally going to have a 20 to 25 man roster easily. And the other thing that Kevin brought up is trades. in a true startup, you're usually not on a 1-minute clock. And you will see these picks get traded 4 and 5 times. You're going to have people like me who want established assets. So I trade away almost all of my rookie drafts during the startup just to move up and get that second quarterback into Superflex and things like that. So keep that in mind. While the mock is fun to talk about draft positioning, it is not always going to prepare you for what a real Dynasty Startup mock is going to look like. And we were talking a lot about the tight ends, Kevin. And one pick that stuck out to me from day one, and I understand these players are not comparable. One is far better than the other, but I find it interesting that the Raiders now in back-to-back seasons have taken the best tight end off the board. Yeah. Was Brock Bowers the best use of their draft capital when they just drafted Michael Mayer a year ago? If I remember correctly, you were a fan of Mayer.
I hate the Raiders so much.
Okay.
Like the way they built that, I understand. Like, I think that the way they're building their roster, like, I get what they're trying to do. Gritty, down. Hey, we're going to run the ball. We're going to just be that tough nails team. So, like, I understand it from that perspective. Kind of like, I really feel like, you know, their coach is essentially turning into like Tomlin of the West. Like, hey, this is how we're going to build our roster. Inside out, kind of do that. I hate that I understand what they're trying to do. I think what they're going to do. So I already did the player build for the rookie guy for Brock. And I talked about it. I said, I think it makes sense on what they want to do from an offensive production standpoint. I think he's their wide receiver too. If they kind of use him as that, like, that out slot kind of guy, get him in space and really kind of utilize him that way, where Michael Mayer is a hell of a blocker. Like, Michael Mayer is a very, very good inline tight end. So, like, and 12 personnel is essentially probably what they're going to do. They have Getsy there, which Cole Kmet pops back up. He turned Cole Kmet into kind of like a fantasy relevant option. Justin Fields, you know, definitely had some limitations as a passer. So maybe that's where that production came from the tight end position. But as far as like worst case scenario for Brock, this is pretty close, because I do think that you just don't. I mean, I like it. I don't mind him being there drafted in top 6 because you're betting on talent. And maybe the best case scenario would be a Devontae Adams moves on next year. Maybe they move off of that. They get a little bit of upgrade, and then they build through Brock, right? Like, they look at Brock as being their Kelsey. Then they say, okay, we have Michael Mayer as kind of our inline guy. Brock's our Kelsey. Now we're just going to go get little small slot guys on the outside. And then, hey, that's how we're going to run it. But they do need a quarterback. They're going to have to address that. Next year's class is trash right now. I'm going to be honest with you guys. Like, I don't know. The betting lines are all over the place right now. Shedeur Sanders is the favorite. And then tomorrow it's Carson Beck from Georgia. It's all over the place. So they're going to have to address that from probably free agency. When you're looking at the class, you know, do you really love the free agent class coming up? You know, maybe Dak possibly is on the move from Dallas. That could possibly be one of those things. So you're betting a lot with Brock, but your hope is that he remains the wide receiver too. Your hope is that, hey, next year maybe they build inside out through him in that offense with Getsy being there. So there's positives. It just is a struggle because you don't know where that production is going to come from this year. Will they use him as a slot, right? Because, you know, Michael Mayer didn't get used very well last year. I know it's a new scheme, but I do think that they're going to be a very heavy run team. I think that's what they want to do. And Gardner Minshew, as much as I like Gardner, you know, he's capped a little bit from a you know, just a talent perspective. I think he can sling it a little bit. He's going to be able to produce fantasy points, but I think it's going to be gritty games. I think that you're going to have a lot of low scoring games. So I think that limits Brock's ceiling as well.
Yeah, Austin, did that landing spot change your take on him for your dynasty picks at this point?
Well, definitely not at the tight end position. Like, Brock Bowers is still the top tight end. Yeah. I will say I did just move Rome Odunze over him in my single quarterback rankings just because of that landing spot, but he's still my 4th ranked player. Like, I still really like him in rookie startups. And I think it'll, you know, the quarterback situation, it is a little murky, but he's going to be on the field pretty consistently. I think in, 3 receiver formations, he's going to be the 3rd receiver. He's going to be lined up in the slot. Maybe him and Devonta Adams will swap out who's outside, who's inside. Like, I think they'll be able to do a lot of creative things with Brock Bowers, and Michael Mayer will stay on the field. Maybe it reduces his target share a bit because there is more competition in that Raiders room, and they're probably not going to throw the ball 600 times this year. It's probably going to be more in that 450 to 500 range. So his ceiling might be capped this year, but if I have the 4th overall pick in a dynasty league, I probably need to build a decent amount of my roster anyway. So I'd still want to take Brock Bowers.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. Guys, let's take a little bit of a look at the draft. I think it's about that time. I like to recap the first 3 rounds. This will probably be the last time you guys hear me recap any of the rounds. I will always have the draft on the board so you guys can look for trends. One of the things I always point out is I love the color coding. So you can just kind of see the trends. All the quarterbacks going in the first round first 2 rounds tells you that this is a super flex. At the first spot, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Jalen Hurts, Lamar Jackson, Justin Jefferson sneaks in. Then we go to Stroud, Caleb Williams, CeeDee Lamb, Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase. I don't think there's any huge surprises. Second round, Justin Herbert, Anthony Richardson. I think the person just wanted to make sure they got Richardson before he got back over to Kevin. Amon-Ra St. Brown, Marvin Harrison, Trevor Lawrence, Jordan Love, Puka Nacua, Kyler Murray, Dak Prescott, Bijan Robinson. And then because it is third round reversal, we slide back over to Austin, who took Bryce Hall, Christian McCaffrey, Brock Purdy, Jahmyr Gibbs, AJ Brown, Garrett Wilson, Tyreek Hill, Brandon Ayuk, Chris Olave, Malik Nabers. The only running backs going in these first 3 rounds, Bijan, Christian McCaffrey, Bryce Hall, Jahmyr Gibbs. I don't think there's any big surprise there in Dynasty. You're always going to see folks lean on the wide receiver and quarterback position in Superflex. But the player I wanted to focus on to get us started, Kevin, is Josh Allen. So I was very interested to see if he was still the QB1 in this draft. And he very clearly was. It was a very fast pick. There were questions about his weapons. Does I presume your cousin, Keon Coleman, answer any of those questions for Josh Allen out there in Buffalo?
No, I think he's fancy Gabe Davis. Like, I think that when
That's
you look at
essentially
him,
what I wrote in my article last night.
like I think he's fine. Like, and I think that he'll be good there. I mean, let's face it. The reason why Josh Allen gets drafted 101 is because his rushing upside. That's really why he's getting drafted there. I think Kincaid is their wide receiver 1. I do think they make some moves, possibly, maybe in the draft late. Maybe they grab a couple guys that, are kind of those flyers, those slot guys. I know they have Samuel there. I don't mind Allen being 101, but I think Mahomes has a case to be 101, in my opinion, with the weapons. They grabbed Worthy. I know Rice is in there, but I do think that those 2 guys, though, are in a clear tier to themselves in this. I know Hurts with his rushing upside. I just also hate the Eagles so much. It's hard for me to draft Jalen Hurts. Like, I just hate everything about their fan base and just who they are. But I get where you sit there at 103. I don't mind actually Stroud. I know that's blasphemous for some out there being at 103. I think 103, where those guys got drafted, 103 to like 109, even like Richardson, I think he should be a little ahead of Herbert. I think that in that range, like, it's really just who do you like the best? Hey, are you going to take this guy? I think there's a huge tier there, but it is Mahomes and Allen. I think Allen's fine because he's going to have the rushing upside. I mean, he's probably going to have more attempts this year than he's ever had in his career. If I had to guess, I think this year is going to be his big rushing year just because of the lack of weapons there and what they're trying to build around him. So 101 to me isn't a shock. And I think he stays around there. Him and Mahomes are going to be clear tier 1 though.
I think that makes a lot of sense. Austin, I'm going to flip that question on its head. Does landing with Josh Allen in a wide receiver room with guys that are all 6 foot tall, does this up Keon Coleman in your draft rankings, being now in an elite offense?
Yes, 100%. I've already moved him up. I originally had him ranked as my wide receiver 7 in this class, behind kind of the consensus top 4, Adonai Mitchell and Troy Franklin, and I've moved him up to just behind Brian Thompson. I do really like Keon Coleman, and I do think he's going to be a helpful weapon for Josh Allen. He's a ball winner. He's going to be able to get those contested catches, which I think is something that Josh Allen is going to need, and this offense is going to need to take some of the pressure off of Allen himself. But to Kevin's point, I think, Allen being ranked first, it's a lot to do with his rushing ability. And in those 6-point passing touchdown leagues, I think there is a very clear debate to be made about having Mahomes over Allen at that one spot.
The next thing I wanted to look at, Kevin, was the rookie wide receivers, and I expected more change than what we saw. Marvin Harrison is landing in what is viewed as a much better landing spot than the other 2 at Arizona. He goes 2-4. Having run these drafts for about 2 months now, I'm used to seeing a 1 to 2 round gap between Harrison, Nabers, and Odunze. And that gap stayed exactly the same, with Nabers going at 310 and Odunze going at 4.6. There were a lot of analysts coming into this draft that said these guys were closer than what they looked. And it sounds like landing spot, at least right now, isn't even changing that perception. Should it, Kevin? Should we be fading Nabers and Odunze relative to Marvin Harrison?
So I think the argument is I think Harris and Nabers are close, in my opinion. I think that those two guys are very, very close in terms of where their value's at. And Daniel Jones is just terrible, or Chaniel Jones, or whatever he says. So like, it's really hard for me because like you love the volume, you love the targets that get. Nabers is the dude, wide receiver 1. He's going to be the guy. So the question is like when you're looking at that, like he's going to get targeted, but do you trust Daniel Jones to be able to get him the football? Now, my boy Drew Lock is just sitting out there though, so don't hate on Drew Lock when he's out here week 4 just throwing dimes there. I think it's close. I think that. When you're looking at Harrison, though, I mean, the gap isn't that big. I love where Nabers went in this draft at 310. That's fine to me. I think that's really good value. I almost took him over Olave. I was very close to picking him over Olave. Harrison, though, at 204 is probably a value. I think that, he's getting ranked where he should. I think wide receiver 5 is fine. But I wrote the reaction for him for Footballguys when he got to Arizona. That's a perfect offense for him. And they didn't address another wide receiver after that. And they got the running back that they needed. So, like, I think that him and McBride is their options. They're going to go after that. So 204 to me is perfect. It would not shock me to see him going probably the same spot next year. Like, that's probably his value. That's probably where his floor is at. Nabers has a shot, like, if they're able to address that quarterback position or whatever, probably to move up. I would see Nabers. I think Nabers going to be wide receiver 6 next year at this time, if I had to put that in there. So those guys to me are close. Odunze is the tough one. I think that he's kind of in the JSN model this year. I think from last year. I think that I like him in that offense, but Allen is more really going to eat probably in that offense much more than Odunze is. Next year would be the year for him. So he's more of that redshirt player, barring an injury.
Was it you who put out the tweet that mentioned like where you just compared the targets in Chicago versus the builds of the players in Seattle? I saw that tweet and I almost swear I thought it was you. So.
No, but I'll take credit for it.
Yeah,
that's kind of how it works. I think it really is very close, right? And I think the difference is you got Caleb, who, I think is a better quarterback than Geno was. And that system might be a little bit better there. But then, they have Cole Kmet as well. Like, he's not going away as much as you hate him, Ryan. He's not going away. Like, Cole Kmet's still there to earn targets too.
I have turned far away from hate on Cole Kmet. I said he is what he is at this point. He has started to find the end zone. And again, I was saying, I thought this could end up being one of his better years ever.
Yeah.
Pre-Odunze, I don't know where I stand with him post-Odunze. Austin, you mentioned you moved Odunze past Brock Bowers. Did landing in Chicago tied to Caleb Williams? You have been an advocate that this Daniel Jones problem is a 1-year problem. Was that enough to get Odunze past Nabers for you?
No, because Odunze has his 1-year problem, which is to Kevin's point, Keenan Allen and DJ
that's
Moore.
Fair. Yeah.
And so them both having a 1-year problem, I'm going to still take the player that I think is more talented, which is Malik Nabers. And I also think Nabers has a good chance to be a volume hog this year, which would push him up kind of the rankings, just because they don't have much else in New York. And I think that they're going to have to find some ways to really, really utilize him and make him the primary offensive weapon to keep defenses off balance. So I'm fine. I'm still have Nabers ahead of Odunze, and just because like they have a ton of weapons in Chicago. Like it's those 3 receivers, it's Kmet, and they have a ton of running backs that I like. So they're going to be able to spread the ball around a ton. Odunze won't have to be kind of that primary pass catcher the way that Malik Nabers will need to be in New York.
As I was scanning the draft board, Kevin, a pick jumped out at me, and it is an auto pick from what I can tell here. So I'm not going to hold this against Team 5, but it also says a lot to where ADP currently stands. Justin Fields going at the 5-6 ahead of Tua Tagovailoa and Drake May. I can't imagine anybody is advocating for him to go ahead of those guys. But what is Justin Fields' value right now in this very ambiguous situation in Pittsburgh?
I would put him probably, I think, oh gosh, I don't have my rankings off the top of my head, but I think he goes, I think there's an interesting debate between him and like where Bryce Young is going, because Bryce, they're finally building around him in that offense, and you love Dave Canales and you like that he's going to be starting. He's got that first first overall pick. I think that he should be around, Fields should be around the 8th round. I think in that range, 8th and 10th round in there. I think that would be a better spot for him there. I think this ADP is just based on, because they've had so many drafts pre, him getting traded and all of that.
That's a great point.
But yeah, him going at a 2 is ridiculous. 2 in the 5th round is an absolute freaking value, by the way. Like,
the Superflex.
That's a smash. When I saw that, I was like, dude, are you kidding me right now? Because I was looking at it like, yeah, I could get him here too. Like, yeah, Fields had those guys is not there. I think Watson, Fields is an interesting argument, but I still think Watson kind of outweighs him because he's starting, and we know that role is going to be. And it just comes back to like the NFL really told us what they thought of Justin Fields, and people can say what they want. They're trying to do what's best for him, all of that. I think that's nonsense because teams don't care about what's best for them. Like, teams want the value and the picks back. Like, that's what they really want. So Fields in that range, I think he's around Bryce's range, and I think that he can start. I'm not a big Russell Wilson guy. I do think that, he can find that value, find that volume. And I think that they are building an interesting team there in Pittsburgh if they bring him back. But I still lean Bryce a little bit. I think it's one of those things where in that 8th round, it's kind of like, yeah, I'll take Bryce as my QB3. And I'd be pretty happy with that.
And Austin, I was going to ask you about Fields as well, but I want to just take a quick look at Odwar's team because Kevin drew some attention to it. What a team build so far. Lamar, Tua in that late, grabs Cousins in the 11th in a super flex. Puka and Cooper Kupp, Tyreek Hill to go with the stack with Tua Tagovailoa, and then Keon Coleman, Deebo Samuel. Like, great team build. They don't always catch my eye. That one certainly caught my eye. Austin, my question to you is Fields a buy candidate? Is he a hold candidate? Are you actively looking to get him in any of your current dynasties, not looking just at startups?
Yeah, it really depends on the price. If I can get him for like a 2nd or 3rd round pick, I feel decent about it. But if I have Justin Fields, I'm definitely holding right now. I want to see how the preseason plays out, the camp, all of that, because I do think there is a great chance that Justin Fields gets to start this year. The Steelers, they have no reason to start Russell Wilson. They're paying him the vet minimum contract. They don't need to start him. Maybe they do to give Fields some time to integrate into Pittsburgh. But I definitely would be holding on to him if I have him right now, particularly just because of what you probably gave up to get him. Yeah. And the fact that if he does play and he has one of those kind of, it's funny to call it a vintage game, but a vintage Justin Fields game where he goes and he runs for 100 yards and 2 touchdowns, that's going to be your sell time if you think you need to get off of him.
Yeah. Last player I want to talk about on the top of this draft board is also regards to the rookie running backs. We're going to spend some time talking about these rookie running backs. I think, if I'm seeing this correctly, the 2nd one just got drafted. I will scroll the board here in just a moment, but the person I want to draft is on the top half, or talk about is on the top half of the board. And that is Kyren Williams, Kevin. So they went out and got Blake Corum. Corum goes to the other Los Angeles team in a surprise to everybody because they had him inked in to the Chargers for many, many days, but the Chargers went, I think it was a Michigan linebacker or safety instead of going with the Michigan running back. And he ends up in Los Angeles with Kyren Williams. Kyren Williams obviously was a revelation to fantasy football last year, but there were already people questioning if he was going to be able to come back and do the exact same thing. Were you on board with Kyren Williams pre-Corum, and did them adding Corum change anything for you?
No, I don't think it. I mean, I guess if you're going to draft him in the 1st round of redraft, I think maybe you get a little bit more nervous there. But like, are people really shocked that LA took a running back in this draft? Like, they really didn't have anybody behind Kyren, right? And like with Kyren Williams, also like that volume was never going to be, that wasn't coming back again. The volume that he was getting towards the end of the season, like, because just based on his workload and his injury history, he's been banged up. So like, they definitely needed someone to kind of there. I think the big question is, what is Blake's role? Because Blake is he's not a burner. He's not going to be that kind of that lightning, right? He's more of a thunder. So like, to me, like Blake's value rises. And I wrote about him this morning. Like, he's a red zone and goal line guy, even though he's smaller. Like, Blake is that guy where he's going to get a lot of the touches there because of his lateral agility and contact balance. So if they look at Blake as being kind of like a goal line work, kind of short yardage guy, that's going to eat into Kyren a little bit. Like, I do think Kyren's going to get the volume still. And I still think he's going to get value there. But neither one of them is a great pass catcher. I think Kyren's a little bit better, actually. So like, I wouldn't lean like, oh my gosh, Blake's going to be that pass catcher in this, because I don't think that's really necessarily the thought process here. I think these guys are very interchangeable, which should make you a little more nervous because they're the backs, they have similar play styles. They're actually both being kind of like talked about together in terms of that. not necessarily the big burner, the volume, all those type of things there. So like from a dynasty standpoint, I'm still on Kyren this year. I think Kyren's fine if you have him as your running back 1 or 2, if you have a wide receiver build. I don't think you're that nervous. But like anything, running backs are just what can they do for you in the next game? Like that's just how you have to value running backs at this point, outside of maybe Bijan and McCaffrey, Hall, Gibbs, those guys. But that's my biggest probably question mark. You really can't trade him anyway. Like you're not going to get Kyren Williams for cheap, and you're not going to be able to get the value you probably want back from him in Dynasty. But Blake's an interesting one. I like him, and like he's a pretty safe second round pick because hey, he's running back 2. I always say this. If you're looking at who you want to draft in your rookie drafts in the second round, and you're looking at running backs, who's already the running back 2 in the depth chart? If he is, then you probably need to take him because then if anything happens ahead of him or whatever, he's locked in volume. So if you could try to find as much safe locked in volume as possible in the second round, that's what you do.
Austin, remind me, was Corum a top 3 back for you? I know you had him very low in the like overall rankings of where you would take most of these running backs in a draft. But if I remember, I don't think you were that high on Corum to begin with.
I was not. So I had him at running back 9 originally.
I thought it was. I was going to say, I thought you were really low on him.
Yeah, but just as an initial like landing spot adjustment, like my gut says he can easily make it into my top 3 because of him being with Sean McVay and the way that Sean McVay loves to run with one running back. And to Kevin's point, I think that he can start getting that end zone work pretty early. I agree. Kyren Williams probably isn't going to get the same volume he did last year, but I think also overall the overall running back volume is probably going to keep going up a little bit while they have Matthew Stafford, who he's getting older. He's got some elbow issues. So they don't need Matthew Stafford throwing the ball 600 times this year. They need to manage his workload and to try and make life easy for him. So I can see the Rams using both Williams and Corum to take that load off of Matthew Stafford, which, yeah, it'll downgrade Williams some. It'll still probably be useful. And then if he gets hurt, the thing that I did like about Blake Corum is he can carry the volume. I just don't like him because he doesn't have that boom, but he can easily consistently get 20 touches a game, averaging 4 yards per carry.
Now, Kevin, it's not a surprise to me to see running backs falling in a startup draft. It's the nature of how things go. It is a little surprising to me. I know this is not the most popular rookie class, but it is a little surprising to me that how far down the rookies are going, even relative to the rest of the running backs. But interestingly enough, when you look at these running backs, either by landing spot or by medicals coming in, specifically Jonathan Brooks, there's quote unquote red flags. So they're saying Brooks is going to be ready. I think it's easy to say Brooks, who went off the board first, probably has the best landing spot. Though there's also an argument for Trey Benson. And then you have Corum and Marshawn Lloyd, who are now in a little bit of a crowded situation. And those are the only running backs to go off the board. When you look at how they're being drafted here, Corum went last. So Corum is at the 12-9. Everybody else went ahead of him, with Brooks kind of kicking this thing off at the 9-5. Is 9th round where we should start considering these running backs and rookies? Or is everybody telling us how shitty this class is kind of poisoning us against these rookie running backs?
No, I think that 9th round is perfectly fine. I think when you're looking at where the tier is at, like you guys going around him, Zamir, which, is he going to miss the landmine out there? Swift, Pollard. Like if you want to take a shot on somebody like Brooks or Benson, I think that's fine. 9th, 10th round is okay there. I don't think the class is shitty. I just think that the value of running backs have depreciated so much in Dynasty that like if they don't have there's no prospect like Bijan or Gibbs, it's like, I'm just going to wait. And I think that's okay if that's how it has gone and depreciated value there. But again, like I just you got to harp back to like, all right, if you take Benson, like the way I look at Trey Benson, he has James Conner ahead of him. That's it. This is the best scheme that he could have fell into, by the way, because he is very, very scheme dependent. And he went into this Drew Petzing scheme. Its ability to chunk plays out of the run game. Trey Benson hits that. A lot of play action, a lot of just, hard-nosed running, powerful runner. Like he fits all of those categories. Oh, hey, I don't know if you know this, but James Conner doesn't really stay healthy, by the way. Like he has not stayed healthy in a long time. Like he's been good. He's been efficient when he's out there. But like Trey to me is a very he's fun in this system. And what they're building in Arizona, this could be a top 10 offense. I even wrote about it when I talked about Marvin Harrison Jr. It's sneaky. Kyler Murray is still a buy to me because of what they're doing around there. Trey to me just comes in like 9th round for Trey Benson. if we fast forward to next year, Connor's not going to be on this roster. It's very hard for me to see Connor coming back. Trey Benson's now the running back one. Let's say he has a pretty good year, 800 yards or whatever. Trey Benson's now going in that range where you see Isaiah Pacheco in the 6th round, or is Rashad White. Like, so he's probably going to get a value bump. Like, if you're projecting out in Dynasty, if you do that, you're looking at Trey now being a 3 or 4 round value bump where you drafted him. And then if you want to move him, go ahead. Like, if that's where you kind of have some flexibility a little bit there, I like that. Brooks, same thing. Brooks can have that value bump because he might be that wide receiver one, or running back one. And the thing with Brooks is, look what Dave Canales did with Rashad White last year. Rashad White was a top 5 back. Now he has Brooks, and he really likes that. Yeah, he has some guys behind him, but I still think he's talented enough to kind of really go in there. And my comp for Brooks was Le'Veon Bell. That was my comps in the rookie guide in January. I really loved him, the way he kind of manipulates, has that vision, those type of things. So, yeah, he has that. Now, the other guys that you mentioned, Lloyd, I like the spot, but is he really going to get a big value bump? I think he might be like, that Spears-ish value now, like where he's kind of in that 8-9 range in next year. So, like, you have to kind of understand where that value bump comes, because you still want flexibility with your assets. That's kind of the Corum, same thing. Flexibility with the assets. Is he really going to be in the 6th round next year, or might he get bumped up to the Zamir White range, the 9th, 10th round? So, like, that's what I take into account when I'm looking at these running backs.
And he brought up Lloyd, Austin, if I remember correctly, he was your RB1. So does landing spot, obviously Josh Jacobs is there, but we talked about this. Jacobs got a 4-year deal where there's an out in every year of that deal. So if Lloyd's the man, he's the man. But my bigger question is, I was having a lot of trouble when I was plugging Lloyd into my projections. How are they going to use Lloyd this year? Because they also brought back AJ Dillon, who sucks, but they brought him back. So I don't know what they're going to do in that situation, Austin.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely an interesting pick for the Packers because they have a decent amount of depth. But the issue is, like, AJ Dillon doesn't always stay healthy. Josh Jacobs, he's had a ton of volume over the past 2 years. So there's some wear and tear concerns there. So I think this is a bit of a depth move. It'll probably downgrade where I'm drafting him a little bit, because I do think that he's not definitively the second running back in that room. He could be the third, but he's probably a better running back than AJ Dillon. So I could easily see him moving up. And I still like him for the long term, like kind of the succession plan for Josh Jacobs. So he's going to stay high up in my rankings, but he definitely, I don't feel like he got the clear best option out of the running backs who got drafted over the past couple of days.
So we are getting so close to the 50-minute mark, but there is a question I have to ask. So I'm not even going to look at the draft right now. Kevin, which one of these non-drafted rookie running backs do you want to see with your Dallas Cowboys?
Jalen Wright. Give me Jalen Wright please. Like, he would fit everything that we need in terms of, like, the gap scheme. I think he's going to go in the 4th round, though, and we don't have a 4th round pick thanks to Trey Lance. But he's explosive, has experience in multiple schemes, big playability. Like, he has upside. Like, Jalen Wright to me is my guy. I mean, I wouldn't mind Braylon Allen. I'm a kind of a noted Braylon Allen hater, but, like, I think he fits too. So, like, I wouldn't mind one of those guys there. But I think there's a very clear tier break after Wright and Allen in this class right now.
All right. And then I would be remiss if I did not get to my keep trade cut. I do one of these every single week to drive Austin absolutely crazy. And this one is 100% based on this format. No tight end required. But I want to see where everybody stands on Sam LaPorta, Brock Bowers. So last year's hotness, this year's hotness. But I wanted to throw in Drake London, because you don't have to start a tight end. And so Drake London finally gets a quarterback upgrade. Former 1st round pick, number 1 wide receiver on his team. Austin, keep, trade cut, Sam LaPorta, Brock Bowers, Drake London.
Oh, geez. You did good with this one. Well, so I didn't do this in this draft, but typically when I do this format, I'm like purposely like, I want no tight ends. I want none of it. Just
you kind of went heavy. I don't want to say heavy, but you got 2 of them.
I got 2. That's more than I typically do. Yeah. I think for this format, I'm gonna keep Sam LaPorta.
Okay.
I will trade Drake London and cut Brock Bowers.
So my only question to you is, and Kevin, I'm going to let you answer here in just a second. Normally, Austin, you do this very similar to me, where you'll trade the guy with the most value. And I feel like LaPorta clearly in this draft, as I scroll up here a little bit, went as the 4-5. I feel like LaPorta just has that value, but you just think he's so much more valuable than the other two. He's worth the keep.
I think so, and I feel like it's really a toss-up between him and Drake London. Like they have been getting that similar volume, and I don't know. Even though they got the quarterback upgrade in Atlanta, I'm a little bit nervous about where they're going. Like they still have a really good running back, so they could still be kind of a run first, play action type offense. And so, does that mean that Drake London really gets the volume bump we're expecting? Like he's going to get the accuracy bump for sure. But the volume bump, I'm a little bit nervous about, especially because they have added some interesting pass catchers there.
Yeah.
And I do think that LaPorta, to me, like last year feels like his floor. Like I feel like he does have the possibility of like continuing to grow because it's him and Amon-Ra St. Brown. And that's a great duo.
Sir, Jameson Williams is still there. All right. Don't be hating on my guy, Jameson Williams. He is still out there.
Is he though?
He is. He is.
His body's there.
Kevin, we agree on something. I'm a believer too. I've been riding this Jameson Williams thing for as long as I can. Kevin, same question. Keep, trade, cut. You know the deal.
Yeah. I'm keeping London, trading LaPorta, cutting Bowers. And it's really sad to say I'm cutting Bowers, but that's where I'm at right now. That's just kind of with those three guys. I think London's in for a big year with what Kirk Cousins has been able to do with that position. Tight end wide receivers. I think he's had, I know he's had Justin Jefferson, but I believe the stat was, and I was writing my article for him, was like he's finished top 10 as a tight end wide receiver. His tight end wide receiver duo has finished top 10 in fantasy the last 3 years. And that's something to say for London. I think London's gonna have a big year.
So someone said, it was Gator, said that Austin's trading London because of Michael Penix. So I think that's absolutely fair. And I'm not even going to let these guys answer this. You thank whatever God you believe in that you have those two players and hold them forever, because I adore both of them. That is the answer to that question. Guys, I'm going to have these guys recap their draft. Kevin, I think you've done this show with us before, but if you haven't, you do not have to talk about every single pick. You can talk about who you want to, who you don't want to, but talk to us about your draft. It seems like, based on things you've said during the draft, you were pretty happy with some of the value that fell to you in some of these picks. So.
Yeah, I tend to build through wide receivers and just kind of look for values at the running back position. I wanted Kyler Murray. I'll be honest with you. Like I was sitting there, and I think that, like I said, he's a value in a lot of leagues right now. If you can get Kyler Murray over Trevor Lawrence, I would trade Trevor Lawrence and Jordan Love straight out for Kyler Murray. Like if I was in a league, like I'm that comfortable with Kyler Murray moving forward. But the way I look at it, just to talk about strategy, if you're in a startup and all of that, Rashee Rice is still a value to me. I understand he's in trouble with the law, but let's be real. He's an NFL player that plays for the Chiefs. He's not going to be that in trouble with that. So, if you can get Rashee Rice, who could be wide receiver one on the Chiefs, I know they just added Worthy. I understand that. But sitting there at 7th round, I think that's good value. And then from the running back perspective, if you're going to wait on running backs, what I try to do is I grab Trey Benson, like I just mentioned. Hey, you could possibly have him out there this year. You could probably get him in there towards the middle of the end of the year. He might be able to finish strong for you. You take Lloyd, who, like I said, I think he could be an interesting kind of lightning pass catcher type role there. But in Chase Brown and Singletary have no competition right now. I think I know they're probably going to add someone today, but I think Singletary is an interesting dynasty piece, like a really, really good value out there for the volume there. Chase Brown as well. So if you wait on the running back position, wait until you can find that, volume that's there. Obviously we'll know more after today. And then you just, you ride it out. Then you take a couple rookies that you could have for the next couple of years, and you still have a very strong wide receiver core. That's kind of my favorite build there. Obviously, because of the tight end position, you're able to get some wide receivers a little later. But I like that value.
Yeah, and everybody knows you got to attack young on the running backs, and that's certainly how you did in this build completely. Austin, go to it, my friend.
Yeah, well, so first off, if you're not on YouTube, make sure you pop over to YouTube, hit that like and subscribe button. My goal here, I took the 10th pick on purpose because I feel like this is one of the hardest places for me to draft in a dynasty startup. I really dislike, particularly in a super flex. I don't like being on the end because of how challenging the quarterback situation can be.
Did you know it was a 3rd round reversal when you made that pick?
No, I did not.
Okay, just wondering, because some people will target the 3rd round reversal. So.
Yeah, which honestly really helped me in this. I felt like I liked my draft more than I typically do. And I decided I also I'm not good at Superflex. I'm not good at Dynasty in general. So this was like a true practice for me of like, how do I manage this? And I felt great with Jamar Chase falling to the 10th spot. I almost was able to get the Burrow Chase stack if one more pick had just fallen my way. But overall, I focused on just like drafting players I liked. I didn't really go like, I want a bunch of young players or this, or I want to win now. I was just like, let me just build a roster that I like and see how it falls. So getting my 4 starting receivers, receiver flex in this league being Chase, Moore, Adams, and Kelsey, like I really love how that felt to me.
Yeah.
And I really loved the running back value I got. So kind of want to anchor RB strategy here. Got Breece Hall with that 3rd pick. And then Najee Harris in the 8th round feels like really good to me. I can't stop with Najee Harris.
I was just going to say, so Austin was a big Najee Harris guy, an enormous Najee Harris guy. And I felt like you turned on him a bit last year. I don't know if it was you I bought him off of, but you're certainly in the league where I bought him for like a 2nd round rookie pick just because I'm like, I'll take a flyer on him. But now you're taking him in the 8th of a startup. So
yeah, which like in the 8th round, like I think he has more upside than a lot of the guys going right around there with that Arthur Smith offense. And they're in this draft, they are investing heavily in the offensive line, which I think is really important for him. Javonte Williams, I've been very down on. But I like the value for him in the 10th round. Like he started to kind of get rolling towards the end of last year. And I know Sean Payton thinks Bo Nix is Patrick Mahomes or whatever. Like that's the narrative that he's throwing out there, but they're probably still going to need to run the ball a lot to make Bo Nix's life easy. The last guy I really wanted to highlight is Jacoby Myers in the 13th round. That just feels like ridiculous value to me. Like he's the number 2 behind Devontae Adams, and Adams he's going to be retiring soon. Myers was good. There were times last year where he was better than Adams. So him going that late behind guys like Josh Downs, Christian Watson, Jameson Williams, it's surprising to me.
Yeah. No, I think that makes a ton of sense. And like I said, you drafting older wide receivers is just after my own heart because I'm a non-discriminator. I'll take all the old guys on my roster. Guys, I struggled for an oops of the draft. I was ready to lay in to everybody here for overdrafting tight ends. You guys did it perfectly. You drafted them where they should have went. I think if my math is correct, only 12 tight ends went. And to Austin's point, only 11 tight ends last year finished in the top 50 wide receivers. You guys did this very, very well. So the only thing I'm going to reprimand you about is how many quarterbacks were available late in a super flex. Scott Fish, I did a show with him 3 years ago, said something that I'll never forget. Quarterbacks will never be cheaper than they are at the draft. And so the ones that draw my attention, Kirk Cousins, we should not be scared off by Michael Penix going in the 11th round. You should play Dynasty in 2 to 3 year windows. Cousins should be there for at least the next 2. Whether you believe in him or not, Will Levis, very young guy with decent weapons going in the 10th round seems late. Adam grabs Stafford and Rodgers, 36 and 40 years old, respectively. But then, like, even Michael Penix is a first-round rookie fucking quarterback who fell to the 14th round. And it goes back to Kevin's point. How long are you willing to wait, and how many games can you win while you're waiting? But that, I don't know. It just kind of felt late to me, and I'm being very, very nitpicky because you guys did a great job drafting. So I don't have a whole lot of bad to say about what went on in this draft. So, guys, that's the draft. Kevin, thank you so very much for joining us. Tell everybody where they can find you, what you're working on, what you're doing.
Yeah, you can find most of my written stuff over at Footballguys. We're doing a big rookie guide 3.0, basically a landing spot, where they're at. We have our rankings. It should be out Monday morning as long as I don't sleep for the next 2 days. So it'll be out there. We will be doing landing spot preview for over 150 players in 2 days. So we're diving in right now. I've already done about 30-ish of them, or like maybe 20. We've combined 20 to 30 of the guys that have been drafted and the guys we think are going to get drafted and where they're going. So just check that out. And we'd be appreciative if you download it or get a Footballguys subscription. It's worth it. It's not even just that. It's everything else that comes with it.
Yeah. The apps, which I saw somebody the other day talking about, I wish there was an app that would do things to your scoring. And I'm like, yeah, Footballguys has done that forever. They'll do the draft rankings to your scoring. And Kevin, quick question from a listener before we move on to Austin. Who has a better fantasy season, Gibbs or Montgomery?
Oh, Gibbs. Come on now. It's got to be Gibbs. I'm one of the biggest Gibbs guy. I was last year too. I think Gibbs from just that really, as much as I hate like I give crap about Jameson Williams. Gibbs is their wide receiver too, more than likely. And so when you think of like what Gibbs is going to do in PPR, I will take Gibbs all day.
Yep. I did an article a few years ago that showed a target is like in PPR 2.25 more than a carry. So like it doesn't matter what you think Montgomery is going to do unless he drops the 18 touchdowns that Jamal Williams drops. It's not going to happen. I still love Montgomery. I'm still drafting him, but Gibbs is going to have the better season, right, Austin?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Also, like Gibbs, he started doing the things that we said Montgomery was there to do towards the end of last year. Like he started getting better at pass blocking, and that's going to help keep him on the field. So I think it's only going up for him right now.
There you go. Austin, tell everybody who you are, where they can find your work.
Yeah, so first off, you can find me on X and Instagram at Austin_FFL. I gotta fix that tagline because that's not my handle. There's a nice little typo on the screen. But then you can find a lot of my written content at clubfantasyffl.com, and also with Last Word on NFL, where I cover the Carolina Panthers.
There you go. And Panthers having a pretty good draft, Austin. Leggett and Jonathan Brooks. I'm not angry at that. Maybe we'll see some better Bryce Young this year.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. I wasn't huge on Leggett, but he's the type of receiver that they needed, so I can build a case for taking that pick there. So yeah, I mean that and getting the Miles Sanders succession plan lined up with Jonathan Brooks, they seem to be chipping away on the offense, which is good. That's where they need to be focused right now.
There you go. As Austin mentioned earlier, if you guys haven't subscribed, especially if you're watching on Twitter right now, Josh puts the link to YouTube. Click a button, subscribe to us, mute us for all I care. We just need the subscriptions. But I promise you, we're doing 5 live shows a week. We're here to give you guys all the fantasy football content that you can take, and all we're asking is for you to click a button. We do 2 mock draft shows. This show is every Saturday, and then every Monday we have Mocking with the Stars with Chris and Gator J. This week they are going to have Iowa Mike from South Harmon on. Every Wednesday, our flagship show, No Punt Intended, is live at 7 o'clock. We are going to be recapping the draft with Garrett Price from Dynasty Nerds. Every Sunday we have a show dedicated just to Dynasty, the Dynasty After Party with Joel and Michael Sicoli. I don't think they're actually going on this week because one of them's traveling and everybody's just going to be talking about the draft anyway. So you'll probably see them next week. We now have a best ball show with Gator J and Stacey Perez. Basically, we have you guys covered. We have golf every Wednesday morning. Who's Your Caddy with Kelly Singh and Adam Hollis. There's no reason for you not to subscribe. It's free. Click the button. Always remember, defense wins championships, offense wins fantasy football, and practice makes perfect. I will see you at next week's Mock.